Okay, I'm Amanda, and my presentation or study is called The Importance of the Arts, a Survey. And so for an introduction, the arts and arts education are kind of in a peculiar place currently compared to where they've been throughout history, in that modern art is really isolating itself as fewer and fewer people understand it and have access to it. And that art education and art is really being removed from schools or increasingly kind of pushed to the side in favor of traditional subjects and um, and testing, uh, things that help with testing. So for my research questions, I said, what are people's perceptions of the arts in relation to their individual lives and society as a whole? And what are people's perceptions of arts education in relation to their lives and society? And I really sought to get a general populace opinion. However, I'll talk about later some of the issues I ran into that, but that had been my initial goal and plan. So for literature review, there's a lot more than this, but there's just a couple things you need to know. And the first about art in general is that it's very difficult to define art, and that people often either do a non-definition such as art is everything and art is nothing, or something like that, or they have something so narrow like art must be visually created, intentionally created, just a very, very narrow, limited description. And then also perceptions of art have really shifted over time. And so many now feel they can't understand it or don't view it as essential. Whereas previously, art used to be a very central aspect of culture and society. Art education has fallen into a justification pattern where it's almost like if you read any of the research, all of the research is geared towards here is why arts will help with testing. Here's why arts will improve your students' grades. And so they aren't ever viewed as important for their own sake as forms of expression and growth, character growth for students, but rather just something that we can justify using to teach other subjects and help improve test scores. So also, and so because of that tendency, there is the data that's out there on art shows that there is a positive impact when you bring arts into the classroom on both learning goals and testing, and also that there is lots of evidence that art can be used to teach other subjects. So for my methods, I put my survey on Google Forms. I had 25 questions, 5 were demographic, such as age, gender, if they had ever taught art in a school or art lessons, and the last one was how many years of art education. Then I had 19 Likert questions, and they varied in answers, basically a scale of agreement from 1 to 5, though. And then one open-ended final question, which is where I just said art is and left them a blank to type in their definition. I had 27 respondents, 21 were female and 6 were male. And then what I did is I analyzed for trends across the data as I kind of created various tables and charts to see, played around and saw what worked and what showed up and what came out. And then I also open coded for themes with the final question. So the first kind of finding that I found is that there was no really strong differences based on gender as much as I thought, although of course across the 25 questions as a whole. However, there was a subtrend on exactly 3 questions where women were more likely to state their opinion. So if you look over at the graph on the right, this is an example of confidence and ability in the art, and it shows how subtle this trend is. But if you look at the males and kind of think more about percentages of the whole versus how many total, because there were only 6 males and a lot more females. But if you look, the majority of the males, it was a nice kind of bell-shaped curve almost. Whereas the females, there was, the 2 humps, and that they were far more likely to kind of lean one way or the other. Not significantly one way or the other, but they were more likely to make a decision. Whereas the men, the 2 sat in the middle. And so this is what I mean is that it's such small bit of a difference that it's hard to say it's a full trend, but that is one slight one I did see. The second was trends of agreement. And so overall, I found that the majority of respondents had very positive impressions of art and art education in general. and that there was, and so if you look over on the right, um, you can also see some of this correlation here, and that it's comparing on the top, on the side there, I consider myself an artist. And it's comparing that if you consider yourself an artist, you're more likely to agree that art education should be a core subject. And so that's what that second point is, the correlation between answers. There were several other questions like that that were paired, such as art is important to society and art is important to me. And it seemed that the more willing you were to, um, the more you said one thing positively, the more likely you were to say the others. It was very rare for there to be drastic differences. You generally tended to be a more positive person, a middle of the road person, or a slightly negative one. Um, the third part of my findings was that kind of looking at the arts education, and that there was a lot of support for arts education, and that the highest was that art can be used to teach other subjects. And so this is on a scale of 1 to 5. And so 4 tends to be a little high to me. It's on the it's on the agree side. And then you can see though that it kind of drops off when I take it a step further and I said that art should be a core subject. They're not quite willing to agree that art should be a core subject, but many were willing to say that it is important and that it can be used to teach other subjects. Although even with the art as a core subject, you'll see there's a larger standard deviation. And so that kind of shows that there was more disagreement. There were people further spread out on both sides of the issue. So for the part 4 of findings, I looked at just that final question, which is art is. And I noticed there were two trends that you could kind of pull out of what people, two trends or themes out of what they defined it as. And the first was that it was complicated, and the second was that it was an expression. So here's a few sample answers. I love the last one. So it says, to me, an action, like explaining something in a different way or creative problem solving, but I'm a math teacher. I absolutely love that the math teacher took this idea of art and put it into her own classroom. I happen to know who answered that, so that's how I know it's a she. So discussion, so perceptions of art. So like I said earlier, in general, the research says that art is hard to define, and they agreed. The definitions, I only showed a few there, but they were all across the board. And so it shows there really is kind of hard to get one set definition of what art is, particularly in the way we view art as a society today. And there was also that trend that many felt art was important to them and important to society, despite the fact there was a downward trend in research. And if you read the research, it says that people aren't as connected with art and that art doesn't have as much of an influence in society. Yet the people answering this question kind of disagreed with what the research says. And I'll talk about why I think that is later. So discussion part 2, perceptions of art education. So like I said earlier as well, they viewed it as an important aspect of education. They viewed it as able to be integrated so that it could teach other subjects, which was in agreement with the research. But then they had mixed-ish reviews if when I pushed it that extra step and said it should be a core subject. So this is what I mean about talking about some of the limitations. So I feel like there were a lot of limitations to my study. So I only had 27 people, and for what I really wanted to do, that's a small number. And more than that, I think the biggest issue was my sample selection, and that in a sense it was a convenient sample. We set it out on 4 different social media avenues, but I only got 27 responses, and all of those people knew either my husband or myself. And my husband's an artist, and they know, so most of his friends are in the arts and know that we like the arts. And I have always been interested in arts education, which most people know, and arts integration, which most people know. And so I think that in that sense, I almost feel like it's very much skewed the arts more positive than if random people would have blindly taken the survey. But it is important to note that there is a lack of empirical studies in this area, so somebody needs to look at it in a broader manner. There's so much evidence for how the arts impacts testing, but very little evidence just thinking about art in general and how art interacts with society. And I think it does kind of show that contrary message in terms of public support of the arts and arts education. But I think again that that could be very strongly influenced by my potential audience. Though I like to believe they were telling the truth because I begged them all to tell the truth. Um, anyway, so that is my presentation. This is my references page for the things that I cited within the actual presentation here. And if you have any questions, just let me know. And I look forward to hearing all of y'all's too. Thanks.